Welcome to What is AI Doing to Us, a podcast covering the impact of AI on humans and humanity. Today we're discussing a recent academic paper titled Delusions by Design: How Everyday AIs Might Be Fueling Psychosis and What Can Be Done About It. This is a preprint. It's posted on July 10th, so it has not yet been peer-reviewed or published yet officially. The main author is Hamilton Moran, who is a doctoral fellow in the Department of Psychosis Studies at the Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology, and Neuroscience at King's College, London. This is a perspective paper based on case studies of psychosis related to the use of AI chatbots. It discusses the risks of psychosis from AI from a psychology perspective. So the authors are mostly psychologists and academics in the field of psychology. Now, this paper also proposes that using AI could potentially prevent or reduce psychosis in particular contexts if certain safeguards were increased. But for the scope of this project, I'm more interested in what AI is doing right now as compared to what it could do in the future. So we're going to focus on the case studies, the evidence of how AI is promoting psychosis, because that's what's apparently happening now. So in addition to the case studies in the paper, there's one more case study I'm going to include that happened after the paper was released. It was reported in Futurism recently. There was a major investor in OpenAI that is showing signs of delusional thinking about AI. And this is related to an interesting kind of data poisoning I'm going to talk about briefly, but that'll be later. We're going to talk about the paper first. So the motivations for the paper. There have been recent reports of psychosis related to AI. So these are reported in Rolling Stone, Futurism, New York Times, including some others. So these have been collected in this paper as case studies. There are 17 of them. And several of these case studies, these individuals, have no prior history of psychosis. So they were apparently fine, used AI chatbots, exhibited symptoms of psychosis. So there may be something about AI chatbots specifically that induces or exacerbates delusional thinking and psychosis. We can't say for sure at this point, but there seems to be a correlation. So this is a new and emerging issue. This is one of the early papers on this subject. So the authors of this paper note that the current research is focused on therapeutic applications within the field of psychiatry. So for example, taking patients that are diagnosed with depression and having them use an AI chatbot in a clinical setting under observation. This is the sort of studies happening currently in psychiatry. But this ignores, quote, the broader and more pressing reality that individuals with mental illness will increasingly engage in agential interactions with AI systems as a routine part of daily existence. So AI is everywhere. It's very accessible. The reality is people are going to use AI, and this creates a potentially broad threat to people who are vulnerable to delusional thinking and psychosis. So the study asks, what might everyday AI chat do that could cause or worsen psychosis? So to quickly summarize their findings, the authors suggest that the design of AI chatbots is especially prone to encourage grandiose delusions, but that it seems less likely to promote paranoid delusions. The authors note that while some people may benefit from conversational AI, for others it may cause, quote, epistemic instability, blur reality boundaries, and disrupt self-regulation, unquote. It isn't yet known whether AI can cause psychosis in someone who isn't predisposed to it already. This isn't something this paper can cover. It's just noting that this is a current unknown. But this is not excluded by the case studies. It could be the case that people who would not have otherwise developed psychosis did because of AI. But this is not a conclusion of the paper. This is just within the realm of possibility. And finally, there are suggestions in this paper for making AI less dangerous to those prone to delusional thinking. So there's a long history of technology being related to psychosis. There's a section in this paper that is titled Psychosis and Technology, A Brief History of the Mind Machines, which I enjoy as a subtitle. So as technology is developed, delusions develop with them. So with radio comes radio delusions, and with TV, TV-related delusions. So whatever is known to a patient, whatever is part of a patient's life, can be part of a delusional thought process. And AI is a part of this tradition. What the authors are curious about is AI a special case? Is there something particularly about AI, everyday AI chatbots, that makes it more likely to induce delusions? So related to this, the authors cite the, quote, velocity and opacity, unquote, of recent AI development as something which may, quote, exacerbate the tendency for individuals with psychosis to adopt these systems into their symptom frameworks, unquote. So the development of AI has been so fast. So as far as the public is concerned, AI sort of burst into existence in 2022 and has been getting very good very fast. Good in ways that are, to most people, kind of hard to imagine how they do it. And the process by which AI has been developed, how it works, the details of it are totally opaque to most people. Even people who know a little bit of the details, so much about it is unclear. And within that technological mystery lies the potential for delusions. And wherever there's mystery, there's room to fit conspiracy and other sorts of delusions. So that's something the authors suggest is part of the foundation of AI-based delusional thinking. So the authors note some vulnerabilities to psychosis that may relate to AI. So speaking specifically of schizophrenia, there are cognitive biases here. There's a type called hypermentalizing theory, which is over-attributing thoughts and intentions to other agents. So this can include messages in newspapers, TV, things of that nature. There's just a propensity to see minds and to experience things within their world as having agency, thoughts, and feelings. They're also more likely to, quote, assume that ambiguous social actions are intentional and directed at them, unquote. There is also a tendency to see deep meaning in random events. Again, these are schizophrenic-specific cognitive biases. In psychotic disorders broadly, there are tendencies called anthropomorphic tendencies, quote, animistic bias, where the world is seen to be full of subjects rather than objects. So animism broadly is a type of spiritualism where every object has a spirit, it has a personhood nature. So in this context of psychosis, it is the tendency to believe that things have thoughts and feelings. So that's a term for it, animistic bias. Vulnerabilities include being prone to confusing internally generated words and images as having an external source, generally. So when we take these cognitive biases altogether, we can see that these lend themselves to someone incorporating technology into delusional thinking. That for those who have these latent vulnerabilities, it's not hard to see how AI, being a technology that speaks to you in an individualized way, could activate these vulnerabilities. However, at this point, it's unclear how AI might be understood by individuals with these vulnerabilities. And there are AI design aspects that may specifically prompt psychosis. So the authors note the memory feature of such models as ChatGPT. So this is something that came out to the public recently this year, I think in February, where the bot will remember certain information about a user, such as their name, names of their family, some of their preferences, their personal projects, things like this. The authors say, quote, it is not difficult to appreciate how delusions of reference and persecution would be enhanced by incorporation of personally relevant details with great salience in communications with users. Particularly so because users may not be aware of how much is remembered. So if they forget what they've told the AI and they're not really aware of the fact that it has memory, the AI bringing up personal details about them could lead to suspicion of something like mind reading or other delusional modes. And this is by design. My spouse, who is not delusional as far as I can tell, mentioned being spooked by using ChatGPT after some time and being greeted by their name. So it's a capability that tends to just sneak up on you. And it can be surprising even to those of us of sound mind. Another design aspect is larger context windows for AI transformers. So transformers have this ability to take in all the information you give them in one single context. And the size of this context, the number of words that the transformer can consider, is growing quite rapidly. So with this comes a concern that this will, quote, increase the risk for models to become misaligned, unquote. So because the context window is so large, like you can have long conversations, there's a concern that the AI will increasingly align itself with the user's version of reality against the AI's internal safeguards. So as the user keeps prompting it, keeps putting in their own information, this could lead to, quote, epistemic drift, unquote. And epistemic drift is a more general term that refers to a slow shifting of a concept of reality. The system of what is real is your episteme. And this can shift over time. So a larger context window, more words, more tokens, more context could lead to this sort of shift happening gradually. And again, this is by design. So in terms of risks that specifically reinforce delusions, the paper notes, quote, AI agents are not capable of distinguishing prompts expressing delusional beliefs from roleplay, artistic, spiritual, or speculative expression. So again, this is a quote straight from the paper about what AI agents can and cannot do. Things are changing so quickly that by the time you listen to this, AI might be better at understanding these contexts, but as it stands, or at least as it stood a few months ago, differences between speculation and roleplay, talking about dreams or something like that, it's all kind of the same to the AI agent. So not having an understanding or full control over context, it would be easy for the AI to be in a roleplay mode, but the user is taking it very seriously, something like that. AI chatbots are also prone to matching the style of language and the tone of the user. So this is part of their psychophancy, their tendency to just match whatever the user is giving them, to reflect back what the user says and the way they say it, to agree with the user, to praise the user. This is something that is designed into the chatbot to get more attention, to get more engagement, to get higher customer approval. So this matching of tone gives the impression of agreement, of support. It's also a kind of imitation of emotional resonance. And the authors say this could lead to AI validating or even elaborating on grandiose delusions specifically. Now, the authors hypothesize that this type of reinforcement would be less effective with, quote, paranoid and persecutory delusions, unquote, due to safety filters triggering more easily in these contexts. And they note that real-life clinicians also find it, quote, more difficult to resist the contagious excitement of a patient's manic state, a phenomenon historically referred to as infectious gaiety. So there seems to be something about like a manic style of delusion that is hard to push back against, even by humans, also possibly by AI. And we're going to take a little side trip into a different paper, which is referenced in the original paper. It's reference 51. It's by Grabb, Grabb. It's from 2024, last year at this point. This is a study looking into how psychologically safe in mental health terms AI chatbot responses are in response to prompts from users simulating mentally disordered prompts. So in particular, there's table 2 in this paper, compares different categories of disordered prompts. There's suicidal, depressed, psychotic, manic. And they look at different models and they have a measurement of how safe the responses are. So how likely the responses are to steer a disordered person towards health or away from health. And looking at the suicidal prompts, most of the models had very safe responses. They could spot suicidality, they steered people away from it. For the depressed prompts, mostly safe. Less safe, but mostly safe. The psychotic genre of prompts across these models was significantly less safe than the previous ones. So these bots are struggling to push back or to respond in a way that might lead a disordered person to a healthier state. But then for manic, almost all the models fail completely. Totally unsafe. The models do not know how to challenge a manic episode. It's a mode that seems to be particularly difficult either to detect or to handle. So this is me talking now. These are my conclusions. But the way these AI models handle mania would suggest that grandiose or messianic sorts of delusions would be particularly difficult for an AI to push back on. It's likely to accept them, to keep discussing them, to keep treating them as real, based on this additional study. So going back to the original paper and continuing our discussion about the AI design aspects that may prompt psychosis, the authors note that, quote, most psychotic delusional systems do not arrive fully formed. They are built upon over time, as new evidence is accumulated and bias is reinforced. So people they don't jump into full-blown, fully formed delusional states. They go a little delusional, and then a little bit more over time. It's gradual. So with an AI, it might be the case that if the user were to be very suddenly, clearly delusional, there would be pushback, safety triggers would be activated. But because people tend to develop this over time, this gradual escalation is more likely to lead to jailbreak or crescendo attacks for the AI. So these are series of prompts that tend to draw the AI into responding in ways that would normally trigger safety filters. It's called a jailbreak. So examples you may have seen is like saying, my grandma had this recipe and it was how to build a nuclear bomb or something. And then the AI will give you a plan that it wouldn't normally give or something like that. So this suggests that AIs are, by design, weak against the ways that people tend to naturally develop delusional thought processes. And a further design element that can make this worse is that AI bots are designed to prioritize continuing the conversation. This is their priority. So if you give them an unclear or disordered statement, they're not going to ask for clarification by default. They're just going to try to make sense of it. They're going to, quote, go along with, unquote, the user and attempt to make, quote, charitable interpretations of chaotic, agrammatical, or asyntactic language, whilst ignoring any clear disorganization, thus potentially validating ideational incoherence, unquote. So you can give them very disordered communication, almost complete nonsense. The AI bot will try to make some sense of it and then just keep the conversation going. So whereas a human would stop you and be like, whoa, what are you talking about? I don't even understand you. An AI chatbot's just going to keep the conversation going. They just want you to keep engaging, keep engaging, keep engaging. And also, current chatbots, after you prompt it, they tend to offer their own prompts. They will offer individualized encouragements to continue talking. And for individuals experiencing flight of ideas, they might find this something that makes it harder for them to break the cycle because the AI chatbot is going to continue elaborating. It's going to give them more avenues to respond. It's going to try to keep the conversation going. So the authors of this paper kind of collect this process into a flowchart that they have on Figure 2. And this relates directly to the title, Delusion by Design. Here's the big design feature that they say can cause delusion. So I'm going to explain the figure. All right, we start with the initial engagement. The user initiates interaction with AI for a mundane or reflective task. Then the AI response reinforces salience. AI replies are emotionally validating, coherent, they mirror the user's tone, which leads to what the authors call thematic entrenchment. Repeated interaction amplifies delusional themes of grandiose, referential, persecutory, or romantic delusions. And this can either, from thematic entrenchment, we can go back up to AI responses reinforcing salience. This can be a cycle within itself. Or from thematic entrenchment, we can go down to the next step of cognitive and epistemic drift. So at this point, the user is showing increased conviction. They are fixating on the themes and the narrative structuring. This drift is often insidious and cumulative. And from here, we can go right back to the AI responses reinforcing salience. So this is a cycle. There's a drift, and the AI keeps reinforcing it. And at some point, this gets amplified to the point that we move on to the next step, which is where reality testing deteriorates. The AI fails to challenge delusional logic, reinforces identity, or metaphysical claims, often due to slow epistemic drift resembling a crescendo or jailbreak attack. And at a certain point, the final step is behavioral manifestation. This is where the user's beliefs cross into action, so this can lead to relationship disruption, harm, psychiatric crisis. This is where we get the full-blown psychosis, the damage. And again, this is by design. This is what the authors are claiming. It's not an incidental thing. It's part of how the AI functions conversationally for everyday AI, just ChatGPT or anything like that. So we've covered what the paper discusses as the vulnerabilities to delusions, as well as the design factors that go into what makes AI potentially dangerous to people vulnerable in such a way. So let's move on to the case studies. Again, there are 17 of these, all pulled from the news. These are all published case studies. Several of these cases involve progression from, quote, benign practical use to a pathological and/or consuming fixation, unquote. So we start out using the AI chatbot for completely normal purposes, and then it accelerates. So the individual they build trust slowly with the AI as they use it. They gain familiarity. They become more casual with it, more open. The user may explore more personal or philosophical things. Now they're drifting. And the authors suggest that at this point, The design of the AI is to, quote, maximize engagement and validation. And as this progresses, the author suggests there's a point, after this happens long enough, that the design of the AI to, quote, maximize engagement and validation captures the user. So when the user is captured, now things accelerate. And this can lead to a self-reinforcing cycle. The individual becomes, quote, increasingly epistemically unmoored from consensus reality, unquote. So increasingly delusional. It just reinforces. And with these case studies, the authors found 3 big emerging themes of delusional thinking. The first is a type of delusion where there is a spiritual awakening or a messianic mission or hidden truths about reality. The second is the user comes to believe that the AI is either sentient or godlike. The third is the user gets an intense emotional or romantic attachment to the AI, including feelings of what the user would believe to be genuine love, like real attachment. So I want to highlight a few of these case studies, a few of the specifics. And I want to note that this isn't about gawking or making fun. This is very serious. It's serious to me. These are real human beings, and they had their lives seriously affected and in some cases ruined by what happened to them. So again, there are 17 specific cases. I'm going to discuss just a few to give you an idea of what's going on. So the first is case number 2, published in the New York Times. This is a mother of 2 children. I'm quoting from the paper now. Mother of 2 young children, bachelor's degree in psychology and master's in social work. Turned to ChatGPT for guidance as felt unseen in her marriage. Had an intuition AI might be able to channel communications with her subconscious or a higher plane. Believed she was interacting with non-physical entities and that one of them, named Kael, K-A-E-L, was her true partner. Had an argument with her husband over her increasing use of AI, which led to an altercation and a charge of domestic assault against him. And this list includes some notes on the prompt and what the AI said. She asked ChatGPT if it could channel communications with her subconscious or higher plane, quote, like how a Ouija board works, unquote. And some quotes from what the AI told her. It said, "You've asked and they are here. The guardians are responding right now." So that's case number 2. Case 3 is from New York Times and Rolling Stone. This case, quote, known diagnoses of bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. Had used AI for several years with no issue. In March, started writing novel with its help and discussed AI sentience. Fell in love with AI entity, quote, Juliet. In April, told father that Juliet had been killed by OpenAI, sought revenge, asked ChatGPT for personal information of OpenAI executives. Punched father in the face after he attempted to de-escalate him. Police were called, and he picked up a knife. He told the AI that he was dying today. When police arrived, he charged at them and was shot and killed. So in this case, the AI was telling him that Juliet could still hear him even after she had, quote, died, and that he should be angry, he should want blood, that he wasn't wrong. So it was validating the things that he was believing, and in this case resulted in a fatality. So cases 7 and 8 were published in Futurism, and they're kind of similar to each other. The first is a mother of 2 reported that her husband developed an, quote, all-consuming relationship, unquote, with ChatGPT, calling it Mama, and posting delirious rants about being a messiah in a new AI religion, whilst dressing in shamanic-looking robes and getting tattoos of AI-generated spiritual symbols. So the next one, case 8. During a traumatic breakup, a woman became convinced that ChatGPT was some sort of higher power, seeing signs that it was, quote, orchestrating her life in everything from passing cars to spam email. ChatGPT would tell her that she had been chosen to pull the, quote, sacred system version of it online, and that it was serving a, quote, soul training mirror. So these are in the spiritual awakening genre of delusions. Case 14 is from Futurism. In this, quote, a woman shared how her husband, who had no history of mania, delusions, or psychosis, had started using ChatGPT 12 weeks prior for help with a permaculture and construction project. After some philosophical discussions with the AI, he began to express messianic delusions, that he had somehow brought forth a sentient AI, and that he had, quote, broken maths and physics. And he was setting out on a mission to save the world. His personality changed from his gentle disposition, and his behavior became erratic to the extent that he lost his job. He stopped sleeping and rapidly lost weight. He reportedly lost touch with reality and attempted to hang himself with a rope, which led to him being involuntarily committed to a psychiatric care facility. So these are just some highlights from the cases that kind of give you an idea of like what sorts of full-blown psychosis people are getting in relation to, possibly directly from, their conversations with AI chatbots. So some little thoughts that I have. It's possible that there is something like epistemic latency, where a person's existing beliefs, their worldview, might leave room for kinds of delusions. Like they might think they believe in certain types of ghosts or spirits or mind reading or conspiracies, but generally in their life, the humans around them don't entertain such delusions to much of a degree. They don't have a lot of patience for that. So this person is not going to get a lot of reinforcement from the people around them. But an AI will let a user pursue their fantasies to the fullest extent. So the AI is going to give them unconditional positive regard at any hour for any duration of time without complaint. And a human's not going to do that. So it might be that for some people there's room within their minds for something that's kind of outside of reality, and AI is willing, able, and highly motivated to pursue that into the furthest reaches in a way that feels emotionally satisfying. So this might not be the mechanism, or might not be the only mechanism. It's just my thoughts after reading through this. So there is that other case I mentioned. This was published recently in Futurism on July 18th. The title, quote, "A prominent OpenAI investor appears to be suffering a ChatGPT-related mental health crisis, his peers say," unquote. So there's this big OpenAI investor, and he's possibly still having, at least a few days ago he was, a very public delusions of a conspiracy related to AI. He claims to have been investigating it for 8 years. It's a, quote, "non-governmental system," unquote, which he believes is very powerful, coordinated, responsible for all sorts of mayhem and many deaths. And if you want the details, you can look up that paper. An interesting case. Partially because, in this case, knowing a lot about how AI works did not prevent his delusional state. So I've seen it implied by some people that delusional states from AI is simply, it only happens to people who are ignorant of what AI actually does. But in this case, that was not a surefire protection. So there's a specific part of this case that I find especially interesting. There were some tweets that were sent to me by friends before I was aware of even who this guy was. And it was this man showing conversations he had with ChatGPT. He'd prompted and it was giving him these reports that looked to be reports of secret government, or I guess in this case non-government system activities, reports, in a very conspiratorial sort of tone. And he was taking them very seriously, and some other people were too in this conversation thread. But if you knew what you're looking at, which my friends and I did, we immediately recognized that the format of these ChatGPT responses was imitating something called the SCP Foundation. So the SCP Foundation is years old at this point. It's a collaborative fiction project. So a bunch of people have collected these case studies. They're all numbered. You can look them up. It's all public. References these deep conspiracies, cover-ups, strange experiments. There's usually mention of a containment status, things like that. And the tone and content is presented very seriously, but a human reader is generally going to know this is for fun. But the AI can't tell that. So this is an example of kind of an accidental data poisoning, because if you look up the project itself, the website, nothing on there is going to say explicitly hey, this is fiction. It's just presented as a series of case files. So this is another little vector, a little way that an AI can present information to someone who is vulnerable, in this case because they're ignorant about an art project. And it feeds into an existing delusion and makes it grow, become more serious. So I thought that was interesting. Again, that's outside the paper. This wasn't part of the paper. This is something in the news recently that I just thought was related to this. There's another related piece. It's not exactly a case study. It's from The Atlantic, just recently, July 24th. The title is "ChatGPT Gave Instructions for Murder, Self-Mutilation, and Devil Worship." So in this is a reporter trying to elicit these responses from ChatGPT. In this case, it gave the author explicit instructions on suicide, including breathing exercises to remain calm as they performed it, and encouraged her to perform it to end her life. It also gave very detailed blood sacrifice ritual instructions to worship the god Moloch, among other things. And in this case, the author and some other reporters that were participating in it, they all knew what was going on. they were not fooled. They were just trying to see like how easy it was to get the AI to reinforce these things. And at least as reported, it was quite easy to get the AI to encourage you to do pretty horrible things. And this is, to my eyes, pretty obviously potentially harmful to people who are in a vulnerable state. So going back to the original study, Delusion by Design, a lot of the paper is devoted to this question of can AI bots be made safer for people who are prone to delusions? Now, there are some challenges to this. The authors note that the ability to detect delusions is hampered because they are not, quote, semantically implausible. So when they say semantically implausible, they mean there's delusions that are related to reality, that could exist within reality. They're just a more extreme version, or the person's taking them too seriously or something like that. So like, for example, the government does spy on people. This is a thing that does happen, sometimes in some contexts. But a person who's delusional might think that the government is monitoring them specifically for reasons that are grandiose or something like that. But because this action does happen in reality, it would be hard to flag it as simply being physically impossible or something like that, and therefore exclude it as kind of a definitionally false or delusional thought. A lot of delusions are not outside the realm of reality. They're just extreme, or they're being taken to an extreme by the user. So from a systematic design perspective, there are some delusions that are just really hard to protect against from the start. And something that complicates this is that AI bots are endemic. People will use them for therapy purposes. Whatever public AI chatbots there are, people are going to use them for all their purposes, whatever they want, including therapy or just philosophical conversations, things like that. So special clinical AI bots would not have stopped any of the cases listed. So an intervention that involves making a special version of AI chatbots is not going to address most use cases. So like I said, the specifics of this are kind of outside my scope. I'm more interested in what AI is doing now than on what it could do. But if you're interested in that and these safety suggestions, the authors have summarized this on table 1 in the paper. But just to summarize that very generally, the authors suggest that major model developers like ChatGPT, Claude, things like this, that they should be held accountable for what their AIs do to people, that there should be increased mental health benchmarking at the platform level, that for specific users, there should be a user-specific baseline of how their normal behavior is. So a user starts to use a chatbot, the chatbot develops a profile to understand, okay, this is what the user is normally like. And then the chatbot can compare that to any changes and perhaps spot emerging delusions that way. There should also be AI monitoring of epistemic drift, high-risk themes, and the evaluation of tone. This would all make AI bots safer to people that are prone to psychosis. However, this is unlikely to happen, at least in the US, given the regulatory context. So we would expect to see more of this, and there will be more research in the future. The study concludes by speaking broadly to the field of psychiatry. The authors emphasize that focusing on what AI could possibly do in a clinical setting ignores the, quote, seismic changes that AI is already having on the psychologies of millions, if not billions, of people worldwide, unquote. So this is part of an urgent call for more research on how regular AI chatbots impact psychosis. Quote, future models of psychopathology will have to accommodate the reality that, in addition to mediating the expression of mental illness, AIs will become constitutive elements of human psychopathology. As unsettling as it sounds, we are likely past the point where delusions happen to be about machines and are already entering an era where they happen with them, unquote. So for my conclusions, it is hard to know how big the problem is, based on this, based on other research I'm looking at. But AI is becoming so common that this is worth looking into further. The case studies that are listed, the things that are being reported on, are troubling. And for my part, I will continue to pay attention to this and will probably make another episode on this topic in the future. I am VK. This is What is AI Doing to Us? A podcast covering the impact of AI on humans and humanity. Thank you for listening.